What's up, guys? So, I have two huge articles for you guys about Resident Evil 7. But before we continue, I just want to say shout outs to these two guys over on Twitter for giving me this information. So, these two articles are from GameSpot and IGN. After this video is over, I'm going to be talking about the analysis breakdown of the 8-minute gameplay IGN posted. So, stay tuned right after this video is done. But I want to talk about some information in both these articles, information that interested me and things that I feel you guys should know about. However, I'm not going to be covering every little detail, so I highly recommend you go to the links at the bottom in the description and read the whole thing for yourself. But let's just get right into these articles. So the first piece of information I want to say is that the journalist played 4 hours of Resident Evil 7, and he wrote this: after spending 4 hours with Resident Evil 7 during a recent trip to Capcom Japan, one thing is clear: this is a survival horror game in every sense of the phrase, with inventory management, item scavenging, and a constant sense of dread. So he's basically saying, even though our previous Resident Evil titles, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, they really were not exactly what you would call survival horror, but this is survival horror. This is something we all knew already, but I do love the way he emphasizes this is survival horror. He says, in fact, based on my time with it, Resident Evil 7 so closely adheres to the tenets of the franchise early entries that I can best describe it as the original Resident Evil set in first person, which again, Resident Evil 1 is very inspirational upon Resident Evil 7. He then says, I searched for keys to specific doors, solved myriad riddles across the manor grounds, and memorized shortcuts back to a few precious save rooms, all the while evading the deranged members of the cannibalistic and I suspect incestuous Baker family. So it seems that the Baker family, they don't just spawn in one or two spots, they actually follow you as you progress through the game all over the place, which is insane because you have to do backtracking in this game, which means that you can actually put yourself in a predicament face to face with one of the Baker family members. He then provides us with a screenshot showing one of the Baker's living room, and it seems that there are hidden doors and secret passages all throughout the game. That's what the picture actually says on the bottom. And as you can see that there's a door in the back with some kind of animal on it. Now it seems like you have to go get the key that responds to whatever animal is on the door. And speaking of animals, we do see deer antlers and a deer figure also in the room. He then goes on to say, none of this is to say there's a lack of action this time around. It's here. It's just a more measured type of action. My demo demanded that I scavenge every inch of the plantation, saving up ammo and health packs so that the eventual encounter with an enemy following a mounting sense of dread, Resident Evil 7 earns its tensions. Now, this means that we're going to be forced to actually really search for ammo. Exploration is something you should not ignore this time around. Looking at the teaser, when we saw our guy, when we saw Ethan fighting off something that looks to be like one of the regenerators in Resident Evil, it seems like these enemies can really take a ton of bullets before they finally die. Jack seems to be the same way. He then provides us a screenshot of one of these regenerator-like enemies as we see him about to shoot them. Again, exploration is something you guys should not ignore this time around. He then talks about chem fluids. There's also a delicate balance to strike with inventory management. Chem fluids can be combined with several items for different results. Paired with gunpowder, they'll create ammunition. Mixed with the series' pervasive green herbs, however, they'll create first aid fluid. This presented decisions to agonize over health or ammo. It made me weigh my current predicament, and I was always in a predicament. And I think, now, look, guys, we're going to be backtracking a lot, right? And the Bakers are always following us throughout the entire game. So we know that we're going to get into some huge fights. So what would you choose? Would you choose health or ammo? In my case, I'd probably choose ammo over health, just because if one of the bakers do see me, I'll have to run to a different room that's very open and find some way to run around them. I'll save my ammo to when I really need it. It's extremely mandatory and I can't run away. But that's just what I would do. What would you would do if you know you're about to hit that hallway and you had to choose between health or ammo? One of the hardest choices to make in survival horror games. He then says Resident Evil 7 doesn't completely remove the action of recent Resident Evil titles, it's just more thoughtful this time. Now, what do I get from this is the fact that we're going to be using our weapon a lot. We're going to get shotguns, flamethrowers, I believe, handguns. We're going to be getting a lot of weapons, blunt and lethal. It's just the way they're presenting the action that makes it seem so different. Resident Evil 7 is a horror game. It's also a survival horror game, which means we have to fend off so many enemies. The other games are just action. That's it. But this game is bringing both of the two wanted things that make Resident Evil Resident Evil. And I think that's a good thing to do. Next off, I want to talk about antique coins. Antique coins, we never really knew the purpose of them until right now. So you can actually have permanent upgrades in the game. And that's pretty interesting. Depending on how many you have, you can use them to get upgrades. In this screenshot here, it says that we were able to increase our permanent health. So it's not like a boost, it's a permanent health increase. Or you can save up to 5 to get another upgrade over there that I honestly can't see. Maybe after we complete the game in our second playthrough, we're able to buy infinite ammo or something crazy like that. And that's all the information I really want to talk about in the GameSpot article. Now let's move on to the IGN article. Now moving on to IGN, they start off by saying Resident Evil 7 thankfully suffers from none of the anxieties. It's a confident statement of what Resident Evil looks like today, and that's an intense survival horror experience with mystery and exploration at its core. And while it may look different from the rest of the series, shifting settings and perspective, Resident Evil 7 in fact feels much closer to the 1996 original than any other game in the series. And I feel that goes without saying. We all know that Resident Evil 1 is taking a huge inspiration on Resident Evil 7. Then they provide us with this screenshot. Now, analyzing this screenshot very quickly, it seems to be a tripod there along with a van. Maybe we're going to be getting a little teaser action. I'm not exactly sure, but it seems that's the way it looks like. We have a van that can fit Clancy, it can fit Andre and Pete all at one time. We do see a tripod and they were going in looking at the setting and everything like that. So maybe we'll finally get the answer to the teaser we've all been waiting for. Now the article begins to talk about the beginning of the Baker journey, and it reads, you wake up in a rundown house tied to a chair surrounded by the Baker family. Jack the father, Marguerite the mother, Lucas their son, and Grandma who's quietly slumped in her chair with her eyes closed. So basically this is describing the end of the Baker's trailer. How we saw the family all around. We saw Jack put one of the meats in her mouth. He spit it out. He then says that eventually, after much tormenting, they leave the room and without any prompts or tutorials, you must find a way to escape. I feel this is interesting because the game is not going to give us any type of tutorial. It's not going to tell us what to do ever. We have to pretty much figure it out for ourselves. And that's one of the things I actually like about Resident Evil 7. You never really know if you're doing the correct thing or not. You don't know if this is what you're supposed to be doing. You don't know if this is the right way. Nobody is holding your hand. And even in video games in general nowadays, they seem very easy. Even if you die in some games, you literally respawn in the same part. Things have no consequences, and that makes the game super easy. But the fact that Resident Evil 7, there is nobody holding on our hand, there's no directions, it's pretty much go into it and figure it out. And that's what I like about Resident Evil 7. We then get to see this screenshot here of, it seems to be the entertainment room. We have darts on the wall, we have an unfinished game of pool. the Baker family really seemed like just a normal average family, playing darts, using the pool table, the TV is turned on. It seems right in the middle of whatever they were doing, something had happened to them. Something just made them infective because I'm looking at the game room here and all I see is normalness. I see nothing odd about this room. And it seems like something happened. They just put their stuff down and that's it. It really adds to the mystery that is Resident Evil 7. Here, we don't see much in this picture. There seems to be a very creepy hallway here, but that's all that really is there. And for the final thing I want to talk about is that Ethan eventually groans who builds this shit. And I want to mention this because this is something that Resident Evil players have been saying in their head for years. And I feel like that line alone just shows that Ethan is just a normal dude, just like us gamers. He's just an everyday guy who's going through such horrible predicaments. He's just saying who builds this shit. Because honestly, in all the Resident Evil games, that's what I think. Who really builds this shit? Who builds an art museum turned a police department into this? Who builds the stuff we saw in Spencer's mansion and the stuff we saw in Revelations 2 and Revelations 1? Who builds this shit? And I feel that's something, that realism is what makes Resident Evil 7 so much more better than any of the Resident Evil games. But anyway, guys, that's it. That's all I want to talk about in these articles. Again, I did not mention everything, so I highly recommend you go to these two articles, link in the description, and you read it for yourself because there is a ton of information here. God, man. But anyways, in my next video I'll have out later tonight, I will be analyzing and breaking down the Resident Evil 7 8-minute gameplay. I'm gonna be out of here. Thank you guys for listening. Deuces, and goddamn this phone and Twitter. Goddamn Twitter keeps making sounds and shit.